Hello and welcome everyone to the Crime View Customer Webinar Series, which takes place the third Wednesday of the month. I'm Sherry Lane, part of the marketing group, and I'm going to be handing things over to Juan here in just a second to talk about today's topic. But before I do that, I just want to quickly remind you that you are welcome to enter questions at any point throughout today's webinar into your question chat area there. Juan's going to be taking those at the end of his presentation. So if that dashboard does collapse, you can go ahead and click on that red arrow and that will open it up for you. So today, Juan, who's one of our implementation specialists, is going to be talking about building and organizing content within your Crime View. So let's go ahead and pass things over to Juan. Good morning or afternoon, Juan.
Good morning. Good morning. Here, let me just make sure I have my window showing here. So can you see the presentation, Sherry?
Yes, it looks good.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So thank you for the introduction there. I'll be starting off today with a brief presentation on the concepts and key items for today's topic. What we'll cover today will apply to both Crime View and Fire View, since the functionality between both applications are very similar in nature. In this presentation, I'll be providing a high-level overview of the dashboard organizational model, which will cover the relationships between widgets, pages, and briefing books, and how that content can be organized to deliver useful information to your users. So let me go back here. To get some background about what each widget type can provide to the overall data organization, we'll also discuss the main purpose of each widget type and view some examples of those. Now, central to our topic today and the takeaway is understanding how dashboard administrators and designers can work together to determine how to organize the data and deliver it to their end users. So if time permits, I'll be wrapping this up with a demonstration on how to copy content in the designer mode and help complete the, which helps complete the overall organization effort in a timely manner. Okay, so for those of you that are familiar with your application and maintain the role of administrator or designer, today's discussion may come as a review of what you may already know. But if you're a standard user, these concepts will be new to you. But just keep in mind that I aim to hit the middle ground here so that the members of each role can work together to increase the value of the application within your agency. All right, so within our application, there are 3 dashboard environments. We have the designer mode, which is accessible to administrators and designers only. This is where they can build and publish widget content and organize it within briefing books. Next, we have dashboard mode, which is the main feature of the application. And this mode allows you to digest valuable information about your data through configurable widgets that display pin maps, trend charts, and density maps, amongst other things. The last bullet here is the analysis mode, which allows all users to conduct ad hoc querying of the data. However, for today's discussion, we'll be focusing mainly on the first 2 modes. Okay, so now research has found that organizing data is critical to conducting analysis in an efficient and timely manner. So by following this concept, we can take large volumes of data and turn it into actionable information by focusing on agency objectives, crime priorities, or geographic areas of responsibility. Okay, so the dashboard's flexible organization framework of briefing books, pages, and widgets all provide the ability to support an agency's objectives using the dashboard here. Okay, so briefing books are at the very top of the organizational model. Think of briefing books as pretty much any other book that you've used in the past. Okay, so books that have pages in it or multiple pages with content that can convey information over to you. Okay, we strongly recommend that each book be comprised of a collection of similar content, whether it relates to geographical boundaries or data relevant to a particular division within your agency. Take note that books are created in the designer mode and must be assigned to a role to be viewed by users. Okay, so we'll cover a little bit more on that later in the presentation here. Within each book are pages that are used to group different widget types. So there's a total number of 10 pages allowed per book. But with careful thought and about the organization of data, each page within each book will tell an informative story to its target audience. Okay, so one more thing to note here is that the pages are created, edited, and organized within dashboard mode. And I'll give you a brief example of that once we get into the demo. So ultimately, the widget and the tools that can come with the widget type is what the end users will interact with while consuming the content, which then warrants the increased amount of thought and time that should go into creating each one. So the last note here about widgets, they can be created in one of two places by administrators and designers. So one is in the designer mode, and the other is in analysis mode after you run a query. Okay, so here's a more practical look at the same model. So on the left, you have the briefing books listed within the tab and dashboard mode, and the pages on the right are all visible upon selection from the drop-down window in the top center of the dashboard web page. And lastly, again, within those pages, you have those widget windows. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about widgets here. So those are built by the administrators and designers through a what, where, when workflow that is very similar to the query builder functionality in analysis mode. So keep in mind that this workflow is also used when creating queries on demand and alerts. Okay, the What tab allows the end user to select a query layer that has been pre-configured during the initial dashboard project or any future professional services that add on profiles. To the right of the layers are the associated safe queries that allow a user to filter their results by selecting anything within those trees there. Okay, moving over to the Where tab. This is where you subset your results by a specific geographic boundary. So whether you select from a pre-configured list of features or create your own reference points, those features are all available to you in this tab. All right, moving on to the When tab here. Slightly different from the When tab that's available in analysis mode, just based off of the user interface. This When tab allows you to adjust your temporal filter for your query. So the user interface might be a little bit different, but the overall end product is the same. So it allows you to adjust your temporal filter there. What is significantly different through each widget type is the Options tab when you run a query. This is where additional parameters exist for the calculation and display of features for the density, temporal trend, repeat location, and links and relates widget types. Okay, so we'll be covering these as we describe the widget types here in the next couple of slides. All right, so first widget that we'll cover is the filter type. This is your basic PIM map with additional tools that allow you to interact with frequency and temporal charts. You can also view the data in tabular format. And this tool provides the ability to export data for analysis outside of the application as well. This widget is perfect if you want to show and interact with charts or the data in tabular form. Okay, so the Options tab for this widget type is the most simplistic of all types that we're going to be talking about. So it gives you the ability to simply provide a layer name, select a default legend if you have more than one, and allows you to display the results as a heat map by default. Okay. Moving on to the next widget here is the density map type. So this widget displays a choropleth map by showing the density of incidents within a predefined boundary. So with darker polygons showing higher concentrations and lighter colored polygons showing less concentration. So end users can interact with this map by selecting and identifying each polygon or viewing the results in tabular form as well. So this widget can be used if your goal is to show the concentration of something within a particular administrative boundary. So for example, crimes within, beats within your jurisdiction or RDs as well, okay, as an example there. So the Options tab is a bit more involved for this type, so allowing you to set the geographic boundary here in the first boundary layer tab. And in the Legend tab, you're given the ability to adjust the default values, for example, adjusting transparency of a layer or the color scheme that you can use for the map there. Okay, so next we have the temporal trend type, which shows a total number of crimes per day using a bar chart. So the statistics available for selection are displayed as line features in the same chart. So with averages as a red dotted line here in the image, and standard deviations as the white lines above and below that red line there. Okay, so this Options tab for the temporal trend type is the most involved amongst other types. So here you have the ability to configure the parameters that will ultimately impact your statistics line calculation. So for example, you have the ability to adjust how many years of data you want to include in the calculation, the number of days that you want to forecast based on the averages from previous years, the buffer duration, which creates a buffer around the target date in the historical years and includes the averages from that in the calculation. And next you can choose to display either 1, 2, or 3 standard deviation lines. And getting a little bit long-winded here, so the just to wrap it up, the rest gives you the options to turn off the default features and provide a layer name for your widget there. Okay. So as I mentioned, that was the most involved. So the rest that are coming here are pretty easy to follow. So the next widget here is the Repeal Locations. And this widget does a great job at displaying locations with a high frequency of crime or calls for service. I've also seen agencies use this feature to map collisions. So by using these graduated symbols, you can quickly distinguish between intersections that may be outliers when it comes to the frequency of collisions that occur. So end users can then interact with the results by selecting the symbols and viewing the data in tabular form as well. Okay. The Options tab for this, you can set the minimum number of points required to be considered in the widget results, as well as display the top 5 or top 10 by adjusting values. So if you're only interested in viewing the top 5 intersections or street segments that have the most collisions, then you can adjust that there for your widget. You also have other options to adjust other default values related to symbol size and color using those other options there. Okay, so almost done here with the widgets. We have 2 more. So the MultiLayer Widget allows you to configure and overlay 3 different types of layers. So they include pin maps, repeat locations, and density maps. So an end user can interact with each layer the same way that we've described in the previous slides. So you have the option to toggle between each layer and utilize the tools available for each one. So a good scenario for this widget type is, for example, overlaying a recent robbery pin map with the home locations of known violent parolees, right? So ultimately you get a proximity view of crimes and the home of the known offenders in that general area. Okay, so that's just as an example of what you can use this for. The Options tab for this widget type has been discussed previously. So again, because of those widgets are included within this one widget type, we can just move on to the next slide here. So the last widget type is the Links and Relates, which allows you to display the relationship between data sets based on a common field value. So be it a case number, person ID, or driver's license number, right? So the related pins on the map will be linked by a colored line. So you can also view the related record within the Identify window or Report grid, whichever one's more usable for you there. As an example, so this widget would be perfect to show the relationship between a person that got arrested and where that person lives. So granted, I mean, that's given if you have those data sets available on your dashboard, but other agencies utilize this type to link stolen and recovered vehicles, again, to provide a spatial understanding of where vehicles tend to be stolen from and where they're dumped off, right? So there's multiple uses for this depending on regardless of the data sets that you have available. Okay, so the Options tab for this gives you the ability to select the layer that you want to relate and choose to change other default settings for the query as well. Okay, so again, this is a very simplistic Options tab. Again, you just select the related layer and adjust any other options that you want to adjust for the widget there. Okay, so one thing that we did not cover and something that deserves an honorable mention before we move on is the response time widget type. We'll go ahead and just leave that for a later webinar. So if you're interested in using the response type webinar, go ahead and just stay tuned for for that to come in the near future there. All right, so now after understanding how each widget type can convey information, we can now talk about the steps to start building and organizing content. Okay, so I can see how that can be a daunting task given the amount of data that you may have, right? But one way to do this is by breaking it into relevant pieces that different groups of people within your agency can benefit from. So if you notice that members from your traffic or investigations divisions are showing interest in the application, you may be inclined to create content that can be geared to each division's goals or objectives. So as an example, collisions and citations related widgets can be added into a briefing book for traffic personnel, and person-related data sets like arrests, FIs, or warrants can be used to create content for the investigative personnel. Okay, so once you determine how to filter down the data you have, you can then start conceptualizing which widgets you can use to relate the data back to the traffic or investigation officer. Okay, so having this conversation amongst your peers of administrators and designers is a fundamental step to create useful content. Okay, so to tie this back to the standard users, as a standard user, you can also play a role in this process by relaying your needs to the administrators and designers, and also participate in the conversations about how the content can be built. So, admin and designers can have a general idea of what you need to see, right, without prompting you, but you'll both benefit from the outcome if what you need is clearly and consistently communicated throughout this entire process, right? So just keep that as food for thought here. So if you wanted to further limit who can see particular content, or if you wanted to just have certain briefing books dedicated to certain officers, you can use the roles and permissions functionality to do it, right? So the main premise of this functionality is to create roles that have certain content assigned to it, and in turn assign users to those roles, right? Ultimately, this creates a tailored bridge between user content and different user groups. So again, this functionality isn't always used, which is why we're not going to spend too much time on it, but just know that it's available for you to choose to use it at a later date, okay? All right, so here I'm going to jump right into the demonstration here and minimize the presentation and open CrimeView dashboard. All right. So as I mentioned in the presentation, in this demonstration, I'll cover the workflow to create widgets in a timely manner. So now what that means is to copy existing widgets and using it as a template so that you're not going through the entire workflow of building out new widgets from scratch. Okay, so let's say you aim to build a widget that looks at CAD repeat locations for the past 28 days. Okay, so the first thing you might want to do is just go into your designer mode, and then look for a widget, or find a widget that does something similar already. Okay, so I'm going to go into the briefing book that I have set up here, and I can see that I'm already doing a CAD calls repeat locations for the previous 14 days. Okay, so instead of building one from scratch, I'm going to go ahead and just copy this widget here. So select the widget, copy, make sure I'm copying it into the appropriate briefing book, give it a appropriate name. So go ahead and change the name here. Select OK. And this may take a while depending on the content that goes behind the widget, so the amount of data behind it, and also your internet connectivity. So I apologize for the delay that we're having here. So once it completes the copy process, you can see that it gets added at the very bottom of your briefing book here. So one thing to take a note is that it copies it, but the content within it is not updated. Okay, so you can see that right now this is a complete replica and it's saying 28 days. So what you have to do is go in there, edit the when information. So hit edit widget. Leave everything else the same since it's everything that you're looking for. Go into the when tab, adjust the previous days that you're interested in. Go ahead and validate it. If you're interested in previewing it before you do it, go ahead and hit preview. But if everything else matches pretty much the parameters you want to apply to this widget, go ahead and hit save. Just for the sake of of not waiting another minute or two, because once you hit save, it runs the entire validation process, so it creates the widget. And being that we're querying CAD data for 28 days, it may take a while. So you would just hit save query. For now, I'm going to hit cancel there. So in essence, what you did there, you saved time, right, creating this widget or creating this content by using what's already existing, right? So let's take that to a bigger level. So let's say now instead of looking at these CAD calls, right, or this content here that looks at the entire city limits, let's say you want to limit that to beat 1. Instead of creating the same content each time for beat 1, what you can do is take the briefing book, copy it, give it a meaningful name here by adding beat 1. Okay. So what that does, it takes every widget within that briefing book, creates a new one for you. And again, everything in here is a complete replica, okay? So you have to go back in here and make the adjustments. But again, just think about the time that you're saving by just going through each one, hit edit. In the where, select the beat layer, or in this case, I'll use districts. Select district 1, validate, save. And once it renders, right, then you'll have all content that is relative to beat 1. So again, the main purpose of this is to show you how you can save time to create this content by using the copy feature, so that way you can spend more time organizing and conceptualizing the widgets that you can build to relay the data back to your agency. Okay, so once this is done, then I'll go ahead and show you how to add it into a different page within dashboard, so that way you can organize it for your users there. So we'll give it a couple more minutes here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just keep that one there. I wouldn't want to wait for the rest of the widgets to run through the validation process. So when you were going to dashboard there, select briefing book, open the one that we just created. Okay, because we did a complete copy over, everything should be available as well to display. Since we want to deactivate those and use the beat one that we created, we'll just go ahead and deactivate those, activate the one that we created for beat one. And once you're ready to save this information here and have it available for your agency, you go ahead and hit the shield, hit save layout changes, and that would be the first thing they see next time they sign in. Okay, so I hope that's provided some useful information, answered some questions that you may have had regarding organizing and creating content. So I'll go ahead and turn the demonstration over to questions that you may have about what we covered today. So let me go ahead and expand this here.
And Juan, if you don't mind, I'll just jump in here too. This is Sherry, just to remind everyone that if you do have questions, you can go ahead and expand that dashboard if it has collapsed by clicking on that red arrow. And we'll give you just a couple of minutes to type something in. Right now, I'm not seeing any questions unless you see anyone.
I don't know, but yeah, we could definitely wait for any questions that you may have. I'll be more than happy to answer those for you.
All right, looks like there might be a couple coming in.
Okay, let me see here. One second, I'm having issues with my.
I can go ahead and read those to you if that's okay, Juan.
Here we go, I got it. I just expanded
okay.
it here. So I got one question here. How do we get access to the dashboard from our agency? So there's two ways you can do it. You can contact your administrator directly. So you have to find who the administrators are. So there's typically 3 for every application. So you can contact them, ask them to grant you access, right? So they'll create the credentials for you on the back end. You'll receive an automated email from CrimeView Dashboard saying for you to create your password or to reset the password depending on what the parameters are there. But that's one way there is contacting the administrator. The other way is by going to omegagis.com and clicking on the Create Account link that's available there. What you'll have to do is fill out that form, make sure you use your work-related email, and what that would do is that would find your administrators in the database and send them an email saying that you're requesting access to the application. So there's 2 ways you can do it. So one way is to recap, contact your administrator and have them create the credentials for you. Second way is more proactive on your end. Just go to the Omega GIS website and create an account using that link there. Okay. Next question here is, I'm curious about recommendations for organizing information for fire EMS. And that one, I think I can actually refer you over to Brandon, since he's had way more experience with fire view. So I don't know, Brandon, do you have, are you available on the line?
Sure. For FireView, I mean, the concepts are similar. You want to determine who your audience groups are, and Juan did an excellent job of laying that out in a law enforcement context, but it's really, you just replace the names there. So typically, you're going to have your command staff. If you're an accredited agency, your accreditation team or person, whoever that is, you might have fire investigations. And then, the depth you go within your operations org chart is up to you. We have customers that, it stops at, battalion chiefs, and some go all the way down to, firefighters. It really depends, who's interested in the information, how much transparency you want to have, how much relevance you think that has. Typically, agencies will divide it up by shift or battalion, maybe even go down to the station level. And, the lower you go on the org chart, and this applies to both CrimeView and FireView, typically the more simple you want to make it. Don't give a firefighter or a patrol officer who doesn't have a lot of time to sort through this stuff a whole bunch of content to look for. I mean, we deliver a lot in our samples, but typically you want to, we recommend keeping that down to maybe somewhere between 4 and 8 total widgets in their briefing book. So it's just the information that's relevant. Keep it simple so that they can make good use of that. And if you're an active administrator, you can switch that stuff out as priorities change. If it's going to be static, in perpetuity, in terms of what's there, obviously the content updates, then maybe you want a little more variety there. So hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. And we got to thank you for that one. So I think it did do a good job in answering it. So I don't see any other questions. If we don't get any more, then I think we should be good to go. So I can, Sherry, I don't know if you want to wait till the 11:30 mark or.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we appreciate everyone joining us. We know this is a new monthly webinar program that we've just started, and we do record these. So we'll post all the recordings to these. It'll be searchable in the knowledge base. But also everybody who couldn't make it today will also get a link to the recording, and hopefully we'll continue to bring valuable content each month so you can continue to learn how to better use that CrimeView and FireView dashboard. So hopefully these are helpful. Juan, thank you very much, and Brandon, thank you both for providing great information. A future agenda. Yeah, absolutely. There was a quick question about a future agenda. I can tell you next month's topic is going to be managing user roles and access. I don't have anything beyond that, but it is something we are working on, unless Brandon, you had anything more you wanted to add at this time.
No, we'll be publishing that through Sherry coming soon.
Yep, sounds great. Okay, thank you, Mark. All right, thank you both, gentlemen, and thank you all for joining us today. Everyone have a great afternoon.
You as well. Thank you.
Yes, and we'll be notifying that by email. Bye now.